Any other questions? I must have covered all the info. Jamie?
Hi, Clark. Um, as you move west, people tend to develop and sprawl horizontally versus vertically, which obviously has many implications. And I think a lot of people in the West traditionally have a view of it's my God-given right to have a yard and space and room, and I like being in the West and having the natural environment around me and close to my home. So how do you overcome those almost inbred values of space between my neighbor and bring people closer together to live in a tighter environment?
That's a great question. And I think it actually extends beyond the West, but you're right that the West in particular has those characteristics. I think it comes down to a couple things. The first is better design. We've seen in the past plenty of examples of really poorly designed density, right? That can happen for a variety of reasons. It can happen just because it was poorly designed. It can happen because it's in the wrong place. We've all seen that where they're like, it's high density, and you're like, yeah, and it's over on the side of a hill outside of town. And it can happen because, it can happen for a number of reasons. So I think improving design is really important. And some of the tie-ins from the site design examples that I was talking about as well, I think can improve design as well and sort of green up denser areas to make it feel less dense, to make it feel more habitable. And of course you see places, some of the in-town higher density areas really are wonderful places to live. So design's one thing. Another thing is the difference between perception and fact. And I think, you know, it's ironic because there is that fear, and yet some of our favorite places pretty much do what we need to do in terms of development patterns. I live in the downtown core of Glenwood Springs, and it's not high density, but it's not low density, and there's some multifamily housing, there's some single family housing, and there's some mixed use all integrated in there. We in certain places definitely need to go higher density than that, and we're having those conversations in Glenwood right now as we do a comp plan update. But the point is, people, it's got the components of a good compact community right there. There are going to be places where it's going to be more urban and you need to go higher density than that. But that's often what we're talking about. It's the difference between that and your conventional subdivision. And then the other one I think does come down to that last regional scenario planning concept I was talking about, where I think it's one of the things that can help is presenting people with the alternative of saying, well, we understand, you know, we all have that love. We all want a large yard, and, you know, I mean, like I said, I grew up in Lake Creek and Edwards. We had like your classic 5-acre, you know, rural sprawly lot. I loved it. But I think if we think about how we're going to accommodate that next 50,000 that's coming to Eagle County between now and 2035, and start looking at what that development footprint looks like in one way versus another, I think it helps us make the decision, and it helps us come to terms with, okay, well, maybe I'm willing to take a little bit more density. But you're right, NIMBYism is a challenge, and I think there's a real difficulty in communities need to find the balance that works for them between this is really development that we don't want. It's legitimately problematic and doesn't fit with our character and goals. And this is development that is going to change how we live, and it's not necessarily exactly what I'd want, because I'd love to just see everything stay exactly the same. But I think it's probably something I need to get behind. So there's an educational component there that, again, I think takes time and new supporters, which is where, again, imagine having members of a watershed organization supporting certain types of really sustainable development and development patterns. It's a good thing.
Clark.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you have any examples of those different development scenarios and their actual quantities of impacts to water quality or something like that. If anything in California may have been done to where modeling or whatever that runs a particular scenario that predicts a particular concentration based on a scenario.
Yeah, we did a little bit, and I can provide those for you. We did a little bit using CommunityViz, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and it was pretty good. You know, we were able to tie in, you know, impervious cover and some different matrices. We're starting to look at using a tool right now, and we're piloting it up in Bozeman, Montana, on a regional planning project up there to more specifically look at that. And it's a much more detailed instrument. The tool looks, instead of just sort of this is development and this isn't, it looks at building and development types. So it enables that better. And I think that's going to help. We're interested in looking at that and doing some modeling on that and trying to say, well, let's look at some different scenarios for an area and say, what are the water quality implications? But then, you know, so to go back and more directly answer your question, there are. We've got some that I did in my previous life in California, and then there's some other ones that, again, different places have done that. Sacramento one, they actually did do a water demand analysis. The same thing, it showed, you know, significant reductions. The water quality one has been done less, but now that people are getting the connection between impervious cover and getting these different runoff coefficients, they're starting to do that too. So that's a long-winded answer. It's kind of the only type I do.
And the other tool is at WRF. Have you used that watershed model?
Oh, did you say warmth?
Yeah, have you used that model?
No, but the watershed planning project that I mentioned to you before, we did the code review in conjunction with the watershed plan. They were using the warmth model there. Super sophisticated, really, really data heavy. That's for us, you know, for me, that was more data heavy than I was ready to handle. But I think it was really useful for them. I'd like to actually check back with that group and find out how useful it was. Have you guys used that? Are you looking at it?
It looked like a great tool, but again, it requires so much information that you simply don't have in most watersheds.
Yeah, it is.
The cost of obtaining that information and then recalibrating over time was prohibitive.
That's exactly what I think. The area where I was working, this is Amador County in California, was able to get the funding because they provided all the water for the East Bay. And so they got a grant from the state of California and Oakland, and you know, because it really mattered what happened there. No, our tool is the same tool that was initially developed for Envision Utah and some other regional planning efforts, and it's sort of being refined. We're working with a consultant in Portland on that one, and we're piloting in Montana and Phoenix, the Sun Corridor in Arizona. So I'll have more information on that one at some point. I'd love to talk to you guys about it. It'd be pretty cool. We want to pilot it somewhere.